r/ask Reddit. Serious, people who killed in self-defense. What's your story? Shared this before, but I was staying with my grandfather while my parents were out of state and I woke up to a noise coming from upstairs, main floor. I was in the basement and just knew it wasn't my grandfather. He has hearing damage from Vietnam and it didn't wake him up, but there was banging around and heavy footsteps. I was in the room with the gun cabinet, so I grabbed a shotgun and went to check it out. When I got to the top of the stairs I just saw a guy in the living room going through stuff, so I pressed the safety and said he needed to leave. He turned around and saw my unthreatening scared as shit 14-year-old self and told me to just go back downstairs and mind my business. So I repeated myself. He turned around and started walking towards me with something in his hand. So I fired. At this point my grandpa is very awake and comes out of his room and just tells me to look away and call the police. Thankfully, due to all the factors of him being a repeat offender, having a weapon, my age, and castle laws, it didn't go any further than the police coming and asking me questions. It messed me up for a while, and I still think about it often, but I got over it and realized that as unfortunate as it was, I didn't have a whole lot of options at that point. Your grandpa is a good man for telling you to look away. The sight of the man slowly dying would have ducked you up even more. Meanwhile for the Gramps, that was everyday shit when he was enlisted. I want to comment on this to get it off my chest since I don't have opportunities to talk about this with my friends since I'm scared of what they will think. I was born in Honduras. I live in the US now, and from what I remember, it was a very deserted place. I spent most of my time with my walking to this girl's house who was around 16 years old. A couple other kids would come to her house since education was hardly accessible. She would teach us our shapes, animals, colors act. After class was over I went home and I heard my aunt scream from the kitchen, "Ayuda, Ayuda," and then I remember that my uncle kept a gun hidden covered in rocks beside an old bathtub outside. That's where we bathed. He knew how dangerous it could be in this area, so he prepared me for everything. Went around the back and grabbed it as fast as I could. I went in and there stood a man with a knife threatening my aunt. I didn't really grasp what was happening, but I shot him without any second guesses like I was taught by my uncle. I honestly still don't believe I did something like that to this day, and I don't know what would have happened to my aunt if I didn't get there sooner. I still don't feel comfortable talking about this to my friends, but I just want to get it off my chest. Sorry for any grammar mistakes. English isn't my first language. Edit. Thank you guys so much for all the support, and thank you for the gold and platinum, kind stranger. You protected your family. There is no shame in that. I hope that getting this off your chest made your heart a little less heavy. I didn't expect this to get any attention at all, but knowing that there are people out there who are showing me support and know what happened makes me feel 100x better. Worked for an armed messenger service, those guys that drop off cash and pick up deposits from banks' businesses in the armored trucks. Not even 10 AM, and as I was opening the door to the truck, I saw a huge guy, I'm not tiny, over 6 feet and well proportioned, in the mirror, meant just for this thing. Get out of a car and run towards me. He put me in a chokehold and started grabbing for my gun. He manhandled me like I weighed nothing. Would have easily gotten the gun if it wasn't a L3 holster. I managed to draw it, press it against him and started pulling the trigger before I blacked out. I have no idea what he would have done if he got the gun, and I'm not used to just being tossed around like that. He turned out to be blind drunk and played for a college football team. Did you stay in that job long after that? A few more years. I was there 5 years. There were 2 shootings in total during my time. It's not generally a dangerous job if you're on your guard. I've had multiple run-ins, but it was the only time I fired my weapon. I was 12, the oldest of 3 brothers. We were home alone while my parents were out on date night. At maybe 10 PM we hear a loud banging at the front door before a man broke the lock with his sheer body weight and momentum. I told my brothers to hide in my room while I went to my parents' room for their shotgun. The whole time this guy is yelling about where are my keys, and he starts coming upstairs when he heard me fumbling as I tried to load the shotgun. He flung the door to my parents' room open and I fell back with the gun shaking in my hands. I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger twice. The first one caught him in the legs and the recoil made the second shot catch his entire torso. The poor man had been drunk and lived a few houses down the way, but I didn't learn that until after. All I could focus on was how he was begging his mother. She wasn't there, not to let him die, and that he was sorry he let her down as he slowly died on the floor just feet away from me. Sorry about this, man. I hope you don't carry the heaviness. Shit dude, you've got to be one of the youngest I've seen here yet. Hope you're okay. I've shared this before, not sure if it was accidental, but while in college in my first apartment, I came home from work at 3 AM. Some dude was in the hallway outside my door, and I had a bad feeling about it. I paused and went to get the mail, hoping he would leave. Nope. I come back and he is waiting at my door. I asked him what was up, and he said he was looking for John. My name is not John, and I lived alone. I asked him to move and let me in my door. He told me to duck off and get John. I slid between him and the door, opened it, and he pushed his way in. I pushed him out. He took a swing at me. I swung back, hitting him in the eye, which caused him to fall back and hit his head. Out cold. Forever. Apparently John was the guy who lived in the apartment before me. The dead guy spent 5 years in jail because of John ratting him out for drugs. Dead guy came to get some revenge. Got dead instead. It was accidental. You merely defended yourself, and he just happened to land wrong. You did not mean for him to die, therefore it's not your fault. It took police 90 days to figure that out, despite video cameras in the hallway showing every second of the altercation. The closest my dad ever came to shooting someone was a guy exactly like this. Guy was having a bad episode, thought people were trying to kill him. He came into our yard. Fortunately he was trying to get help to get away from the imaginary bad guys and didn't do anything threatening. The cops came and picked him up. Geez man, once my dog scared off a crackhead at the door, but if he got in, I can't even imagine how I would deal with that. I was back at my home country during a civil war. Some people started going to random villages and draft males and use them as soldiers. They eventually came to our house and took me a 12-year and my brother a 10-year. It was a few hours drive until we eventually reached a checkpoint where we would be stationed. Them being animals, one of the commanders took me and my brother to an abandoned building close to that checkpoint and then took off his gear and was trying to rape my brother. I was scared and in a panic I grabbed a decent sized rock and hit him in the back of the head before he can do anything to my brother. He fell and I got on top of him and smashed his face over and over and over with the rock until it was caved in. Me and my brother then ran from that abandoned spot through some mountains and kept running until we reached a city nearby. We went to a nearby mosque, washed the blood off of us and told the sheikh in that area to help us and that we were from said village. To our luck he was a decent human being and returned us back to our village. A few years later we moved to the US. My brother killed himself 2 years ago and I am still in school. Neither me or my brother told anyone about what happened in that spot. All they know is that we escaped. I'm so sorry to hear about your brother. I hope you and your family find some semblance of peace. Thank you for sharing. We all complain a lot, but I love Reddit for these very human stories and very human responses. This level of mass interaction with people who have wildly different lives than yours would not have been possible pre-internet. Duck. I could hear the dude's girlfriend, who was later taken to the hospital for injuries he gave her before he came to my house, crying in another room before I asked to be moved. Talk about re-traumatizing for you both. Yeah, it was bad. She was crying so hard she would start gagging and screaming that I should have killed her instead. Thankful the officers were awesome and let me move to another room. I was with an abusive ex who would come home drunk every night. One night, we had a fight. I had my phone on vibrate and that obviously meant I was sleeping with other people behind his back. He left for a while and came home drunker than I'd ever seen him. He wasn't making coherent sentences, but he lunged at me and wrapped his hands around my neck and sat on my chest. I thought I was going to die. I had done some BJJ when I was younger and managed to pull me legs up under his crotch, and then with everything I had, I pushed him off me. He hit his head on the sharp corner of a table we had in the living room and went still. I figured he had been knocked out, so I went outside and called the police. I was gonna put his ass in jail. I had the deepest purple bruises in perfect fingerprint form around my neck. He would have gone to jail. I smoked a cigarette outside, walked back in after I calmed my nerves just to make sure he wasn't awake and coming for me. He had a huge pool of blood under him. It was almost black looking, so I stood there trying to figure out WTF I was looking at. Put 2 and 2 together and the rest is history. Years of therapy. Self-defense plea. Open and shut. Edit. Thanks for the awards. Although I'm not so sure this deserved them. To answer some questions really quickly. I was toxic and terrible in my early 20s. Had some priors and I was taken into the police station. To say I was charged would probably be going too far. I wasn't. So I should have worded that better. I simply mean, everything was investigated. I did stay in a holding facility overnight. IDKY exactly. I live in a town that's less than 1 kppl, so it's not like a big city with big smart cops. His mom was in prison and his sister lived in Idaho, so I haven't spoken with either. I was asked to not attend THR funeral. I'm so far from a Brazilian jiu-jitsu master that it's insane. Had a very brief brush with it when my brother took it. I wasn't thinking when this assault occurred other than escape and survive. You'd be surprised what you can do when you have to in order to live. You did what you had to do, and this random internet stranger is proud of you. I hope you're feeling well these days. I second this. Best of thoughts out to you. Something that can never truly go away but can soften with time. Glad you are still with us. One night I was walking home. Pretty late, like 2 AM in the morning. I was 16 at that time and I happened to pass a bar. One drunk old dude said, "Hey, come here and buy me a beer." I started to walk faster and pretend I didn't hear him. Right after that he jumps on my back, trying to choke me. Managed to fall hard on my back. He was still piggy riding me. Unfortunately when we fell he hit his head on the curb. Some guy tries to mug me in the street. He tells me to give him my wallet. I pulled my concealed carry and shot him in the leg. Fatal. And pelvis as I pulled up my gun. I grab his gun, a snub-nose revolver, out of his hand and see the chamber. It was empty. That ducked me up for years. Edit. From some of the comments I see, I should point out the revolver was still in his waistband, with his hand on the grip, when I pulled my weapon. I'm sorry you had to go through that. However, he was pointing a firearm at you. Firearms usually have bullets in them. It was justified. Treat every firearm as if it were loaded. That means if you're on the business end, expect bad business. This was a very traumatic experience for me. I had recently turned 18, graduated from high school, and started college. My college wasn't in the best part of town, but I ignored the warnings and didn't pay much attention to my surroundings. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I was walking back to my dorm from a friend's dorm that was across campus. Everything was regular until I started hearing footsteps on the sidewalk behind me. When I looked back, no one was there, but it still put me on edge. I kept walking, but I kept hearing the footsteps. Every time I turned around I couldn't see anyone, and I was starting to get scared. Finally I turned around and saw a man walking further behind me. He was dressed in dark clothes and had strange gait. As soon as I saw him he started running at me, and he was fast. I grabbed my pepper spray from my purse. I was smart enough to carry it on me, and sprayed it directly into his eyes. He yelled, but it didn't stop him for long. So I ran. I knew I could outrun him for a while because I was a state track runner all through high school. I could tell I was getting tired, but I didn't know what else to do. I was on the edge of the campus, and part of nudged right up to a dense forest. That's the part I was on. I couldn't see him, but I could hear his heavy footsteps as he tried to catch up to me. I saw a dead tree that was losing branches left and right. I picked a pretty big one and dragged it to the middle of the sidewalk. Then I took a good sized one that was pretty heavy, but I could still lift it easily. With my branch in hand I hid behind a tree. Soon after I saw him. He was still running fast, and coming right up on the branch. Just as I planned, he tripped, and I saw his shocked, sick face as he fell to the ground. I ran out from my tree and started pummeling him over the head with my branch. I saw blood, but I ran off. Once I got at my dorm I took a second to catch my breath, and then I dialed 911. I explained to them what happened as the operator calmed me down and signaled for an ambulance and some police. I learned later that the man died en route to the hospital. but also that he had been mugging and beating young women for ages as they walked alone in the dark. The police knew what he was doing, but they could never figure out his identity. I had to go to therapy for ages, but I'm semi-okay now, and I never walk alone in the dark. You're a hero. Who knows how many other women you have potentially saved with your brave actions. Bro, you made it to the end. You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.